Hello class, this video is to help you with the I Can Learn Watercolor Painting Techniques worksheets. So I've got some worksheets out there that have 9 different watercolor techniques to try out, and I've got another one out there which only has 6. I'm going to show you the one with 9, and then that way, if you have the one with 6, you'll get some bonus techniques. Doesn't that sound cool? Hello, class. I have a couple of these worksheets. I've got one which has a lot of different choices. It's called I Can Learn Watercolor Painting. And I also have another one which just has about 6 choices. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the more difficult one with lots of different choices so that if you have the one that only has 6 choices, well, you'll be covered. So, I Can Learn Watercolor Painting. As we've discussed, watercolor painting is just pigment mixed with water. So as you can see, I've got my water cup with my paintbrush in here. And I even have kind of like a little tray that I can add some colors and water to. We'll get to that in a moment. So I just want to show you a few techniques. So we're going to start out with wet on wet. And what happens here is I'm going to go ahead and just lay down some water so it's wet. And then I'm going to go ahead and take some wet paint into it. Now this isn't fancy watercolor paper, but when you do wet on wet, as you can see, the paint just kind of fans in every direction and pools and puddles and disperses. And some people like that effect. So you can go ahead and give that a try. All you have to do is get your little box wet before you start. And if you have a better quality paper and you want to make boxes and experiment on that, you can do that too. This is just regular copy paper. So it's not the best for watercolor, but it's what we have. Now the next one is called dry brush. I like to have a little paper towel for this one, because you do need to get your paintbrush wet to be able to pick up the pigment from your watercolor cakes. But, again, I'm going to use the blue. It needs to be very, very dry. In other words, just enough paint sometimes I'll wipe my brush on a paper towel before I go to my paper. So you just kind of want just barely enough paint to move in. So when I take my dry brush with just a little bit of pigment, you can see it's kind of got a scratchy look to it where it doesn't completely coat the paper. And again, this can be useful. Like for instance, if I was doing, I don't know, a sandy beach or trying to represent some kind of texture like a driveway, dry brush is really great for that. So, next, we have gradation. Now, a gradient is where it goes from light to dark, and there's a lot of transitions in between. It's kind of like chalk when you smear it, and it goes from really, really intense to light just in the course of your smear. So I'm going to demonstrate this. I think I'm going to use a color that's kind of dark by nature, and I'll make it progressively lighter. So again, I'm going to stick with my purple here because I'm having a good time with purple. So if I start out with my purple, and on this end it's nice and intense, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it less so as I move my way across. And again, I'm going to just kind of water it down as I work my way across. So it goes from being very, very intense and dark on one side, and then it gets less and less. And if I want to take a little tissue and kind of pat it over here so that you can see how light it gets. When we do a gradient, we just make it go from an intense color and make it progressively lighter. Again, the paper makes it a little bit difficult to do this, but hey, we're doing it. And it's okay to kind of go back in and kind of pat some paint away, so You know, watercolor can be a little unforgiving in terms of getting your white completely back, but again, you can make it go from dark to light slowly, you know, and make a nice transition. Next, over here, my next box says layers. So it says layers. Now, this one, you can make layers of paint, and we kind of did this. So let's say I wanted to start out with some yellow. So I could do a layer of yellow, and then I could come back in, maybe with a little bit of a layer of red. And again, this is pretty watered down stuff. So now I'm coming in, I'm going to do a layer on top of that. Sometimes it's better to let it dry in between. So that's something that we can do. Maybe I'll get back to that one in a little bit. Next, we've got wax resist. Now, I did have somebody say, hey, I don't know if I have this stuff. You do. Somewhere in your house, you have wax. So most of us have wax in the form of crayons. But, believe it or not, wax, you could just rub a candle on your paper. So I just went ahead and made some marks. And then what I can do is I can come back in. I'm going to get a really dark color so I can highlight this. So wherever I lay down my wax, it's going to resist that paint. So that's kind of cool. I use wax resist a lot, you know, especially when I'm doing scenes where I want to preserve the white and I'm not going to need to go back to it because, you know, you can't really get that off, the wax off the paper once you put it on there. But, you know, sometimes if I want to do like a ripple on the water or, you know, like the sun hitting the ripple of a wave, I'll throw a little wax on there, and that's how I'll get that. So wax resist can be really useful when you're painting. Now here it says blending two colors. We can go ahead and give that a try. Maybe I'll try a blue this time. So we'll take a blue, and I'll start out. And when we blend two colors together, maybe I'll try to blend this blue and this green color together. So we're just kind of blending them together so that you can kind of see how they mix. And it's almost like a gradient in the sense that it transitions over into the other color. But as you can see, I blended them together. Now, I think it's time to put another layer onto the colors over here. So I can just keep adding layers on top of it. I'll let it dry a little bit, and then I'll add another layer. And that can be kind of fun because you can see the initial layers underneath it. So, now, we're going to move up to this last row, though we still may get back to layers. And it says alcohol. And I had somebody say, hey, I don't have any alcohol. Well, you do, because chances are you are one of the many users of hand sanitizer. And alcohol has a funny way with paint. I've got some other tricks that I like to use in addition to that. I really love using salt, for example, because they create such interesting patterns with watercolor. But we'll save that for another day. So with alcohol, I'm going to go ahead and just put a little bit of red down. I think that'll be nice. So we can add some red, and normally, so I just went ahead and added some alcohol to it, and I can add a little bit more paint back in. And just has a very interesting effect on the paint. Isn't that exciting? So, and now straws. Again, you might say, hey, I don't have straws. Chances are you've been to a fast food restaurant in the last week, and I bet you've had a straw in your hand, or you've had a Capri Sun or, you know, some kind of something. So with the straws, you're simply going to blow some color. I went ahead and just mixed a little puddle of color. And sometimes you can just kind of blow them down, or sometimes you can add a little dab of color. So I just kind of blew it out of the straw, kind of dipped the straw in and then blew what was on there. Another way that you can do it is you can put some down and then you can blow it in any direction. So there's a few ways that you can use straws that are interesting. And then the last one is stickers or tape. And you may say to yourself, hey, I don't have any stickers or tape. But chances are, I mean, you could peel a price tag off of a product that you have in your house. You could peel something off of a banana. You could do all kinds of stuff. And just the idea here is about masking an area and then laying down. So I'm just going to take 2 little pieces of masking tape here. And artists mask areas all the time, because especially with watercolor, because they like to keep in their white areas. So I'm going to go ahead and paint on top of this. And I've got to let it dry, but when it's all dry, I'm going to peel this area away. And normally I would wait for it to dry, but I'll go ahead and do it now. You peel it away and all of a sudden you have a white area. A lot of artists use this. It's a fence post. It's, you know, it can be anything. So I hope you've enjoyed this sheet, or that you can have a little bit of fun with it. And, you know, try different supplies. Obviously, once this alcohol dries, you'll see how the paint has dispersed in a unique way. Again, all of these little experiments help, because later when you're trying to represent something real, something from observation, you'll have a lot of tricks in your toolkit. And you'd be surprised how these little tricks come in handy.